Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something incredibly fascinating, the hidden psychological and physiological dangers of driving. You know, we absolutely love to brag about how safe modern cars are. We talk about the crumple zones, the smart braking, the airbags all around us. But the reality? The human brain remains the absolute biggest vulnerability on the road. So, here's our mental map for today. We're going to quickly cover the human variable, fatigue and microsleeps, distractions and emotions, inexperience and social pressure, and finally wrap things up with risk mitigation. Let's jump right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the human variable, the legal and moral foundations.
If you look at Section 3 of Norway's Road Traffic Act, it explicitly states every driver must be considerate, alert, and cautious. Now, what's really vital to understand here is that this isn't just about your physical actions behind the wheel, like, steering or hitting the brakes. This legal requirement actually demands total mental readiness to operate a vehicle safely. Literally, your mind is just as much a part of the car's safety system as the tires are. That brings us to Section 2, fatigue and microsleeps, the silent impairment. Okay, check out this shocking comparison. Research actually shows that being awake for 24 hours straight impairs your brain equivalently to a 1.0 promille blood alcohol concentration. To put that into perspective, in Norway, that is exactly 5 times the legal limit. No way, right? But it's true. Fatigue brutally reduces your reaction time, it totally impairs your ability to process information, and it destroys your situational awareness. Yet, surprisingly, it carries almost none of the intense social stigma that drunk driving does. And all that exhaustion leads directly to a terrifying phenomenon called microsleep. Basically, these are involuntary bouts of sleep. They can last anywhere from a tiny fraction of a second up to 30 seconds, where the brain just entirely shuts off. The warning signs are things we have probably all felt on a long drive, right? Frequent yawning, heavy eyelids, suddenly getting tunnel vision, or making those jerky steering corrections. And those short-term fixes people try, like downing a ton of caffeine or blasting cold air, they're total illusions. They really only mask the symptoms for a few minutes. The only actual effective fix is pulling over at a rest area and taking a 15 to 20-minute nap. To really put microsleeps into perspective, if you're traveling at 80 kilometers per hour, a tiny 4-second microsleep means your car travels nearly 90 meters completely without driver control. 90 meters? That is a massive distance. And because your brain briefly shuts off, you might not even realize you fell asleep until you are drifting out of your lane, or worse, completely off the side of the road. Moving on to Section 3, distractions and emotional states, losing focus. So distractions basically fall into 3 distinct buckets. First, visual, which is taking your eyes off the road. Second, manual, taking your hands off the wheel. And third, cognitive, which is taking your mind off the task. Now, in Norway, handheld mobile use is strictly illegal, for sure. But even using a totally legal hands-free system carries a surprisingly heavy cognitive load. Your brain simply struggles to analyze a complex conversation while also analyzing traffic. And we can't forget internal distractions. A crying child in the back seat or, say, a spilled hot drink really requires you to find a safe place to pull over, rather than trying to juggle the whole shebang while the car is in motion. Think about this. If you look away at a screen for just 2 seconds while driving at 50 kilometers per hour, you travel roughly 28 meters completely blind. In a fast-paced urban environment, 28 meters is more than enough time for the vehicle in front of you to suddenly slam on the brakes, or, terrifyingly, for a pedestrian to step right out into the road. But distraction isn't just about physical screens. It's also our emotions. There's this concept called cognitive tunneling. It happens when an intense emotional state, like extreme anger or maybe grief, causes you to fixate on a single thought. This leads to a total loss of your ability to scan the environment effectively. It's deeply linked to stress and what we call the hurry-up syndrome. When drivers are stressed, they start taking really dangerous mental shortcuts. They might just assume an intersection is clear instead of actually confirming it. And ironically, speeding aggressively usually saves a driver less than 2 minutes on a standard commute, while exponentially spiking the risk of a severe crash. Just not worth it. All right, Section 4, inexperience and social pressure, the illusion of skill. There is a massive skill to risk out for new drivers. See, a novice might flawlessly master the technical mechanics, steering perfectly, shifting smoothly, and that gives them a false sense of being a genuinely good driver. But what they lack is hazard detection. They tend to just react to events as they happen, often fixating on the bumper of the car immediately in front of them. For instance, they might feel completely safe taking a curve right at the speed limit on a dry summer day, but they totally miss the loose gravel on the shoulder. An experienced driver, on the other hand, anticipates. They actively scan 15 to 20 seconds ahead to identify hazards long before they become emergencies, and they proactively reduce their speed. But beyond just pure driving experience, we really have to look at social dynamics. Pure influence profoundly alters behavior behind the wheel. The desire to impress friends or simply getting caught up in a super lively conversation can prompt risks a driver would honestly never take if they were alone. This is exactly why Norwegian driver training heavily stresses passenger responsibility. Yes, the driver is legally responsible for the car, but passengers have a firm duty not to encourage risky behavior. Far too many fatal late-night crashes happen simply because social pressure overrides the safety-first mindset that driving absolutely requires. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Strategies for Risk Mitigation, Taking Control. Okay, here are your 4 pillars of mitigation. Number 1, self-correction. You have to honestly assess your own exhaustion or emotional state before you drive. If you aren't fit, find an alternative. Number 2, buffer zones. Maintain large physical gaps between yourself and other vehicles to compensate for any potential lapses in concentration. Number 3, scanning patterns. Actively move your eyes every few seconds to avoid staring and to stay fully aware of the entire traffic environment. And number 4, acceptance. Look, you cannot control other drivers. You can only control your own reaction to them. Giving up your right of way to avoid a collision is always undoubtedly the correct choice. And all of this really leaves us with one ultimate question. Are you truly fit to drive today? Because the advanced technology in your car is only ever as good as the mind operating it. So the next time you walk up to your vehicle, take a second to ask yourself if you're bringing invisible threats along for the ride. Thanks for joining this explainer. Until next time, stay sharp and stay safe out there.